Hey everyone, today we're ranking the survivors from least to most favoured by the entity. Basically how the entity views the survivors, and which it appears to favour or maybe not favour so much. To judge this, we can look at things like the survivors' teachable perks, their lore, and also how they have changed upon entering the realm, if at all. We have 5 tiers: unfavoured and threatened, unfavoured but not threatened, some favour, favoured, and greatly favoured. Let's get started. Starting out, we have the unfavoured and threatened tier. This is a unique tier, and a lot less applicable to the survivors than the killers, I think. Although I do think there are totally a few contenders. Cheryl appears to have some kind of power over the entity, capable even of summoning its claws to block a generator, with her perk Repressed Alliance. I would say this makes her the closest thing to a threat for the entity. The perk mentions that she's accustomed to malicious forces, and now that can be used for advantage. Blood Pact further makes her able to see the obsession when injured. She also has Soul Guard, a protective perk that uses the curses of the hexes and turns it into a benefit, suggesting further that Cheryl can break the rules of the trials herself, to some degree. The entity, I think, likely doesn't favour Yuichi. It made a seemingly strong bond with Sadako, and with Yuichi being one of the only survivors of Sadako, it seemingly helped her out by hunting him down, drawing him in, and then taking him. Yuichi also poses potential threat with his knowledge. He's stated to have a good understanding of the paranormal from his extensive studying of it. It further states he can hear the dead, who warn him of danger, suggesting he has foresight essentially. Then finally, his presence physically projects to those in danger, so there's a bit of a feud between him and the entity, and he has genuine power within the realm, making him a threat, I think. Michaela is another character who was able to evade the entity on multiple occasions, and was one of very few people who actually tried to record it after it began entering her dreams. So I reckon the entity is kind of annoyed with Michaela, and does also see her as a threat. It tried to attack her in her home, breaking through doors and even likely killing her friend, Julian. We can't forget her perks, of course. It mentions in her perk Clairvoyance that she has an intrinsic energy that has potentially been awakened in the realm. She has quite defiant perks, and is capable of blessing totems. Boons are something that she brought into the realm, suggesting a great degree of power, which manifests in the form of boons. Kate is a character the entity is potentially quite threatened by, and partly I think because of how much of a positive force she is. She's also of course pretty well known for resisting the entity, fighting off its claws, and repressing its dark energy from overwhelming her. She also has very defiant perks. Boil Over making it harder for the killers to carry. She's quite literally kicking back as much as she can. Windows of Opportunity providing a layout of useful tools for escape, and Dance With Me removing the entity given scratch marks. Elodie and Haddie are 2 characters who have genuine knowledge on the entity, and have done a good amount of adventuring and have had their fair share of scrapes, making them a fairly considerable threat, through knowledge and experience more than anything. Next we have the unfavoured but not threatened, for the characters who the entity doesn't seem to favour, but equally isn't threatened by, making them slightly more favourable. Felix also evaded the entity as a child like Elodie, but unlike her, he didn't really persist with it, and decided instead to move on. He didn't go gunning for the entity. He has some knowledge of the entity, and I think his escape is still a sore spot for the entity, and makes him unfavoured. But I don't think he can be considered a threat to it. His understanding of the realm is partially reflected in his perks, such as Built to Last, where he can replenish items and their charges completely, which is quite defiant. Jonah, I think, is rather unfavoured by the entity, with his perks centering more around his logical and numbers-based mind, and less to do with entity-given ability. He also has a boon, which is a potential sign of defiance. Jonah was a character the entity put a good multiple decades into taking, by laying a trap and seemingly waiting for him for years. I don't think it's threatened by him, but I think his defiance and the time taken to get him to the realm makes him unfavoured. Zarina is quite similar, I think, with her quite defiant perks, particularly perks like For the People, which is kind of suggested as a thing where Zarina can heal instantly, but is also almost instantly punished by the entity for doing so, by applying Broken and the Obsession status. It's quite a defiant act. In a similar way, Red Herring is another perk that allows a unique effect, and Off the Record is just pretty strong. In the face of the entity's tyranny, she instinctively fights back. David seems extremely defiant, with all of his perks suggesting as much. Deadhard is capable of literally avoiding damage, and it doesn't appear to be entity given, but instead just because of how tough David is, and his experience with taking hits from his years of fighting. I don't think this makes him a threat to the entity, but his clear open defiance and simple ability to shrug off damage I think would make him less favoured. On to the survivors who have some favour with the entity. Ash is potentially one of the stronger characters, being the chosen one of his universe. However, in the realm, the entity seems to have made him into a bit of a joke. I think it does kind of like Ash, or at least it likes mocking and playing around with him. His perks seem almost mocking, playing up to his dumb luck, and the entity seems able to make all of these quite weak too, suggesting a greater control over him. So yeah, I think it just likes messing around with Ash basically. Bill has very defiant perks, with Borrowed Time and Unbreakable, being some of the most trial-breaking perks for a long time, that counter some of the stronger killer strategies. With this said, I think it's worth noting that both of these have since become base kit, suggesting that maybe the entity is okay with his defiance, and maybe even that it's just the right amount to be manageable, and also to install hope, which it can feed on. It's possible the entity has implemented them as base kit, as it sees they are a good source of creating hope. Nancy and Steve are two characters with rather average perk sets. The potential thing showing their favour would be their ability to insta-heal in varying circumstances. Their connection to the realm appears to have been somewhat severed though, with their perks becoming universal. Similar to Demo, it's possible that both Nancy and Steve were also part of a deal with the Mind Flayer, which has since been discontinued, and as a result, making them both less favoured. Our Resident Evil characters are all on pretty even footing. Jill, Leon, and Ada all have some defiance in their perks, but it seems to be entity-allowed defiance. All three can craft items from gen usage, and it seems to be from collecting stuff from the trial grounds. The items are limited though, and can be destroyed by the entity, making them controllable. It puts them in an interesting spot, I think, particularly as their other perks suggest some entity affinity. Overall, I think that lands them in some favour. They are on the more dangerous side for survivors, yet the entity can clearly control them, and feels comfortable controlling them. Adam is a character with some favour, I believe. I think Adam has defiant aspects, but he's also a great source of hope for the other survivors, making him valuable. Diversion and Deliverance are rather defiant perks, that allow things that are otherwise disallowed, and these seem to be possible due to Adam's determination. So I think the entity does favour Adam, but is cautious of his influence, seen through the nerfs it provides, like adding Broken to Deliverance. It's okay with the defiance, but it's not gonna let it go unpunished. Yui is a motivating and altruistic force. Her perk Breakout reflects this. Any means necessary seems to be a defiant action that Yui is able to do through sheer will. I think potentially due to how motivational and altruistic she is though, the entity allows this defiance. I think it does lower her to some favour though, with it being a possibly dangerous thing for the entity, if it lets this kind of defiance persist. Rebecca's role as a medic makes her capable of doing many different things. Similar to the aforementioned characters, her sheer presence appears to install hope in others. She heals so well it leaves others invigorated. She can calm the others, and she even has a greater efficiency in tasks. This makes her pretty great for the entity as a force of hope, but also frustration for the killers. The only downside being her seeming power and influence may be becoming an issue, so she's going to be the top end of some favour. Moving on, we have the favoured tier. These are the characters the entity seems to like. Ace seems quite favoured by the entity, with it manifesting his luck into a real thing, although this debatably could be more of a mocking thing. All his perks center around this idea. Ace's general attitude toward the realm seems weirdly positive, likely because he's escaped his debts, which to Ace is a victory, I guess, based on his constant grin. Jane, I think, holds a good amount of favour with the entity, with it allowing her to stun the killers with lockers. Her other perks cut down healing and remove scratch marks too. I think the fact that when Jane was taken, it looked as if she died due to her car crashing, and so the entity is kind of happy it was such a clean take, as it were, with the world being none the wiser. I don't know, that's my reasoning behind it at least. There's also not any negative side effects really to these fairly defiant actions, meaning I think Jane is actually favoured. Laurie, I believe, may be quite favoured, and partly because the entity sees Laurie as its Maya's deterrent. It provides her with powerful perks like Object of Obsession, which is stated to provide you with a supernatural bond to the killer. Of course, Decisive Strike too, which is maybe the most direct attack back that survivors can do. Basically, if Myers is going to break the rules and marry who he wants, the entity is going to give the survivors the potential to do the same, through Laurie. Quentin seems favoured by the entity also, for a similar reason to Laurie. He's like a counter to Freddy, and acts as a point of aggravation for him, creating more emotion. His perks, in a similar way to Laurie's, allow him to counter a multitude of things. Wake Up allows you to open the exit gates faster, Pharmacy helps out with heals, and Vigil shortens an array of negative status effects, although he has no cosmetics, so maybe he's really at the bottom of the list. Jeff seems to be quite favoured by the entity. Distortion allows him to block aura reading, Aftercare allows the forming of bonds after an altruistic action, and of course Breakdown allows the destruction of hooks for a whole 3 minutes. These all seem to be the entity given powers too, as there's no negative side effects really, suggesting favour, and likely because of Jeff's own altruistic nature, making him a good source of energy within the trials. Feng I believe to be favoured, in part for her attitude she appears to have toward the trials. She's said to be ready for the new challenge, and sees it as the thing she has been training for her entire life. Her perks reflect the entity's favour too, I think. Tap I also think is quite favoured, in a similar way to Feng, with him seeing the trials as a challenge. Upon arrival to the realm, he sees it as an opportunity to not let obsession distract him, and to do his job as a police officer, which is honestly pretty good for the entity emotion-wise. His perks reflect this newfound determination. Finally, we have the Greatly Favoured, for the characters who the entity clearly really likes. I think the entity actually likes the original characters quite a bit. It makes sense too, with them being its original picks for the realm, or the realm we see in game at least. So I'm going to put them all here. They were also all very carefree to take, simply grabbing them out in the woods, which is probably a positive for the entity. Claudette's favour can be seen through her healing based perks. She's the only character who can heal themselves, and botany knowledge also mentions that she utilises the plants surrounding the campfire for healing, suggesting a close tie to the realm itself. Dwight's favour can be seen through his perks like Prove Thyself, that can greatly increase gen speed and therefore escape. Dwight's role as the unlikely leader, who the survivors appear to follow, also makes him valuable to the entity, as someone who provides hope, a key emotion the entity feeds on. Dwight also doesn't really fight back, and isn't really defiant, making him the ideal leader. He inspires hope, but not defiance. Meg's favour can be seen quite simply through her incredibly powerful perks, in both Sprint Burst and Adrenaline, then her further ability to silence noise with her perk Quick and Quiet. She has so much available in her kit to let her avoid the killers, suggesting the entity holds her in high regard. Jake, I think, is maybe one of the entity's favourites, and partly because he just seems to kind of be in his element in the realm. The crows are potentially eyepieces for the entity within the trials, and Jake with his perk Calm Spirit can calm them and stop them from moving, suggesting a close tie to the entity or some kind of favour. He can also do other powerful things, like reducing his overall sound made and stopping his screams, sound being a key thing for killers tracking. This suggests a favour toward Jake. almost wanting him to not be found by the killers. He also has Saboteur, a perk that can destroy the sacrificial hooks, and without a toolbox. It isn't necessarily even considered as a defiant action either, but rather one the entity has bestowed upon him, as there's no negative side effect really, and of course you can destroy hooks with toolboxes anyway, but this unique ability for Jake to do so without a toolbox suggests some favour. Yunjin seems to kind of be into the idea of the realm, the last line of her lore stating that she smiles at the realm and welcomes the darkness within. Her perks show that she has a blunt approach to the trials, with her being happy to make tough calls, and make selfish decisions if it means her own survival. I think this makes her pretty liked by the entity, reflected also in the power of her perks, which allow her to exploit the rules of the trials. It's almost like the entity encouraging a saboteur on the survivor side, to create more emotion. In our top spot we have Nia, for no reason in particular. To be honest, she probably does belong here though. Her perks suggest great favour from the entity. Streetwise extends item duration, urban evasion allows an irregularly fast crouch speed, and of course she has the exhaustion perk, Balanced Landing. Her cosmetics also suggest some kind of affinity with the entity, with one even featuring the spine chill cat, which is quite strange, but I think shows a certain fondness for her. Overall, Nia's life experiences are incredibly applicable to the trials. I think she has the right amount of altruism, the right amount of selfishness, and the right amount of recklessness to be one of the better people in terms of emotion creation and affecting all the other survivors in different ways, whilst also being an adept survivor herself. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. There's a lot of valid and varying perspectives for how the entity views the survivors, and these are just my own, so be sure to drop your own thoughts down below. Thanks, and goodbye.